Hey, I'm Dan Thomas, and welcome to my channel for the Newbie Woodworker. Or anyone, really. I got tired of my drills laying around my work area, so I decided to make a drawer for them under my workbench. The drawer's got enough room for some of this other stuff, too. Which is a good thing. Ignore the mess over here. I probably should have cleaned it up first. Anyway, I'm going to hang the drawer here under my workbench. I don't want to cut the 2x4s, so I'll build a support cabinet, then attach it to the underside of the workbench by driving screws into the backs of the 2x4s. Then all I have to do is slide in the drawer. I'll cut 3 holes in the bottom of the drawer for my 2 drills and my impact driver. There's plenty of room for the drills to fit under the 2x4. They stick out a little below, but it's generally not a problem. If I leave on a drill bit holder, I might have a little trouble getting the clamps out, but I can live with that. I've got enough room left over in the drawer for my push blocks, my drill press vise, and anything else I might want to throw in there. I'm cutting the 4 sides of the drawer first out of 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood. Eventually, I'll build a new workbench, and this drawer will end up in my router table because I never built the top drawer in the router table. So this drawer needs to be 20 inches square and 5 inches deep. Normally, I'd have to cut the front and back shorter than 20 inches to make up for the width of the sides. But since I'm going to use box joints, I can cut the front, back, and sides all the same length. This is my box joint sled. I use this plastic mirror to help me see the cut, and this guard keeps me from putting the mirror too close to the blade. The threaded rod is 16 threads per inch, which means 1 turn of the handle moves the carriage a 1/16 of an inch, 4 turns a 1/4 inch, and so on. You could also use a metric version of the rod. When this arm hits the flat spot on the wheel, I know the crank is facing directly down. It helps me make sure I always start a cut with the crank in the same place. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a build video and plans. I'm going to cut some test fingers first. Not literally. I'm using a dado stack set to a 1/2 inch. I could also use a normal blade with a standard curve, but it's a lot more work. I want the height of the blade to match the thickness of the wood. I've got a scrap piece already in the clamp, so I add the second one, so I'll cut 2 pieces at once. This block fits into the curve, helping me get the stock aligned against the curve. Clamp it down, then remove the alignment block. 8 turns for a 1/2 inch, so the blade makes a full first cut. Then 8 turns to get past the cut, and 8 more turns before starting another cut to give me a 1/2 inch finger in between the cuts, and so on. They fit together, and the fingers are the right length so they're flush to the sides. So it's time for the real cuts. Time for a test fit. It's a little tight in spots, so I might have to do a small amount of filing. We'll see. I'm using my corner clamps just like I will when I glue it up later. Be sure to check out the build video and plans for the corner clamps. I honestly don't know why everyone doesn't use these. They're awesome. Before gluing everything up, I need to cut the dados for the drawer bottom. I'm setting the blade height to 3/16 of an inch using these Craig Precision router table setup bars. That's a mouthful, and it's misleading too, because obviously they can be used on a table saw as well as a router table. Anyway, I start a cut, then double check the depth with my caliper. It looks good, so I finish the cut. Then I check the width, and it's reasonably loose, which is what I want. So now I can cut 2 of the other pieces. But for the front piece, instead of a dado, I want to cut all the way through so I can remove the bottom later. Or that's the plan anyway, and as we all know, rarely does anything go as planned. I do a quick check to make sure the dados line up correctly, and although the back is a little off, I decide to go with it. Because, why fix it now when it's easy, right? That's a rhetorical question, by the way. I should have fixed it now. I used painter's tape around the joints so I didn't have to worry about squeeze out. This takes longer than you might think, but it's well worth it, as you'll see in a moment. To start gluing the front, I need to open the clamps quite a bit and pull the front away from the sides. So I reversed the knobs on my corner clamps so I could use the socket on my drill to open and close the clamps quickly. The glue I normally use is Titebond 2, but this time I'm using Titebond 3 because it takes longer to set, so I've got more time to get everything glued up. But even with the longer set time, I still need to move quickly. Fortunately, I don't have to be careful when I add the glue thanks to the painter's tape. And the Rockler silicone project mat protects my workbench, so no worries about being messy. I had to use an F-clamp a couple of times just to pull the sides together that last little bit. I did clean up some of the squeeze out because, yuck, right? I glued on the bottom part of the front using CA glue and activator and brad nails, so I didn't have to worry about clamps. At this point, I started working on the frame, but I'll show that in a moment. Instead, let's pretend the glue had a few hours to dry, and now I'm removing the clamps. Then I removed the tape, which turned out to be harder than I thought it would be. I wonder if regular masking tape would be easier. In any case, I have almost no squeeze out to deal with, so it worked like a charm. Then I measured for the bottom. I'm using 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood for the bottom, although that's probably overkill, but it's what I have on hand, so that's what I'm using. I tried a test fit, and that problem with the back dado, it came and bit me in the back. I couldn't slide the bottom all the way in. I tried filing and hand sanding the bottom, but finally I just used my belt sander, and that worked. So now I'm going to drill the holes in the bottom for the drills. At first, I only drilled 2 holes for my 2 regular drills, but later on, I'll add another one for my impact driver. I drilled halfway from one side, and the remainder from the other to help avoid splintering the wood. I put the bottom in the drawer, and put the drills in the holes, and they work fine. So I cut the bottom down to the final size. Now I'm starting to work on the frame for under the workbench. Let me change the color of the parts to make them easier to see, and remove the drawer. I want to cut these notches next, so I need some dimensions. This is 20.5 inches wide, which is enough room for the 20-inch drawer slide, and a little space at the back, just in case. That's pretty easy to measure, and it's 3 3/8 inches. Same over here. And I know I want this 1 3/4 of an inch. This'll be whatever's left. But how wide should this be? You might think I could just calculate it, but I want to make sure it's as accurate as possible so the frame fits nice and snug. So I found a couple of pieces of scrap wood the same thickness as the wood I'll use for the braces and clamped them to the bench. Then I measured the approximate distance between them. I couldn't read the tape measure very well at this angle, so it was a good thing I was recording this. Then I cut a spacer a little longer than needed and gradually snuck up on the right length. Now I can use this to help mark where I make my cuts. I'm marking where to cut out the front notch. I watch videos of those people who can measure and mark like they're waving a wand, and I just feel like a muggle. So I get help whenever I can, and in this case, it's the magical Incra Tea rule to the rescue. For me, it was well worth the price. And no, this isn't sponsored. I've already made one set of cuts, but then I realized it'd be easier to cut both sides at once, so I screwed them together. I'm not worried about the screw holes because you'll never see this under the workbench. And yes, I had to screw them together more than once. Don't ask. I need this cut to be 3 3/8 inches, but my blade doesn't go up that high, so I'll have to cut the rest of the way by hand. I'm using my Wixie digital height gauge to set the blade height for the next cut to 1 3/4 inches. I could just use a combination square, but I don't want to take a chance of scratching my cast iron tabletop, at least not any more than it already is. I finished cutting off the notch with a handsaw and a chisel. Now that the front notch is done, I can use the spacer to mark where the back notch goes. Of course, drawing the marks doesn't do any good if you draw them on the wrong side. but I just used the spacer to clamp the stock in the right place for the cut. Remember that this notch is different from the front one, and it turns out it's too deep to use my Wixie plastic gauge, so I have to use my combination square. I try and be careful not to scratch the tabletop, and it turned out okay, but it might have been a good idea to put some tape on the bottom first. One last double check, and everything's good to go. Just like before, I use a handsaw and a chisel to finish the cut. Before I unscrew the pieces, I decided they didn't need to be this tall, so I cut off the excess. Attaching drawer slides can be tricky when you have to fit them into an existing cabinet, but in this case I'm basically building the cabinet around the drawers, so it's a piece of cake. I bought these 20-inch centerline heavy-duty full extension drawer slides a while back, and I'll use them here. You press down on this little black lever to take out the part that goes on the drawer. I'm using a self-centering bit to drill the screw holes. Don't try and attach drawer slides without a self-centering drill bit, trust me. The other side support has to be a mirror of the first one, so once I figured it out, I marked the front. And then I attached the second slide just like the first. Only, mirrored. Time to attach the slide to the drawer. It's nice I don't have to worry about keeping the drawer aligned properly with the cabinet. Just set it on my workbench. Then I attach the other slide the same way. That was easy. Like I said, building the cabinet around the drawer is a lot easier to get it right the first time. The next step is to add the braces across the front and back. So I measured and cut the pieces, and they look good. The entire drawer assembly will be held up by these braces, so I'm going to glue them and use screws. Time to mount the drawer support to the workbench. Oops. I'm only adding one screw to each side first to make sure everything fits right. It works great, so I add the remaining screws. I'm covering the back of the support because it'll look nicer and help keep dust out of the drawer. And I'm adding a small piece over the top here, again to help keep dust out of the drawer. In theory, all that's left is to add the drawer front and see how it works. But once I got it finished, I decided I had enough room to move the holes closer to the front, which would give me a little more room in the back. And I wanted a third hole for my impact driver. I know some of you are probably wondering why I put the holes near the front like this, which means I have to turn the drills around to put them in the drawer. I could have put the holes here so I didn't have to turn the drills around, but that puts a limit on how long the drill and battery can be. I mean, they fit now, but who knows what the future holds. So I tried to slide the bottom out, but in spite of my great planning and forethought, I couldn't get it out. That figures. So I'll have to patch the holes in place, then cut new holes.
The hell did it glue in place?
I'm using a hole saw to cut plugs just slightly larger than the holes. I need to sand the plugs down to size, so I attach a plug to a bolt. I use 2 nuts to make sure it doesn't come loose, and I chuck it in my drill. Then I run my drill in reverse and use the belt sander to do the sanding. This can take off a lot of material quickly, so I'm checking it regularly with a caliper. When I've got it close to the right size, I put it on my drill press and use a sanding block to get it down to the final size. Using the drill press this way doesn't take material off as quickly as the belt sander, so it helps keep me from overshooting the size. Now that I've got the plugs the right size, I'm ready to glue them into the holes. so I'm putting some tape on a block of wood and putting it under the holes for support. I'm using the tape so I don't accidentally glue the board to the drawer bottom. The plugs are tight in the holes, which I wanted, so I use another block of wood with tape on it and a hammer to tap them down until they're flush. The glue's had a few hours to set, and I've already marked the center of each new hole. Unfortunately, the hole saw cuts off my view of the marks. Naturally. So I'm pre-drilling the holes for the pilot bit of the hole saw, which will make it easier to get the hole saw started in the right place. And there it is. I don't really like the push-to-open style drawer slides, but I thought that's all I had. Turns out I had a normal set of drawer slides buried at the bottom of a drawer, so I swapped them out. It was the same brand, and almost all the screw holes lined up, so that was nice. You know, this seemed like such a simple video when I started, but by the time I was done, I'd shot 78 video clips and made 94 SketchUp slides. So much for simple. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider leaving a comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to ring that bell so you'll be notified when I release new videos. Thanks!